Oh,
I
God.
think it's going to be really bad for the US economy, in which case there will be no choice except to make very deep cuts to in a broad-based way. So we almost need to buy some time and figure out how bad the situation is, which is why we need the air cover to sort of see how much DOGE uncovers, because that'll make the problem less at the end of the day, right? Because cutting that stuff will mean that's fewer fixed programs we have to cut. So that's kind of where we are. So I think we're in a delicate 60 to 90 day period, I think.
The public will surely feel the effects of the growing pressure on the US government to reduce its spending, but the road ahead won't be easy. That's the most recent opinion of Social Capital CEO and seasoned venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya. A historical comparison reveals a startling similarity. The United Kingdom experienced a serious budget crisis in 2010, with a deficit of 10% of its total GDP. The government responded to this by enacting stringent austerity measures and cutting spending in order to bring the budget back into balance. The deficit gradually decreased over the ensuing years, reaching 3% by 2016. But even though these cuts decreased borrowing, they also caused a great deal of annoyance, which fueled the public unhappiness that ultimately led to Brexit. The United States is currently facing a similar problem, as its deficit approaches 7%. The objective? Reduce it to 3% as the UK did. The crucial question still stands, though. Will spending reductions have the same effects or lead to unforeseen repercussions? Watch this space as Chamath offers more enlightening observations about the state of the market. Remember to like and subscribe to this video if you like to keep up with financial and economic trends. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Let's get back into it now.
The last couple of years, the Biden administration, and specifically Biden and Yellen, did one thing that I hope no government afterwards ever does, which is they were effectively speculating on rates. And what they did was, the Treasury's job is to finance the government, right? Their job is to go into the bond market, sell bonds, use that money, and redirect it to HHS, to Social Security, to defense, wherever. They financed it with all of this short-term paper. And part of it was they believed that inflation would be in check and interest rates in the future would fall. So whatever happened, we would be able to go back into the markets and borrow later for cheaper. It turned out that was an enormously incorrect assumption, and they should not have made that decision. So today, what Trump and Bessent have to do is extremely difficult. They have about $10 trillion. So call it, 25, 30% of our total debt we have to refinance in the next 6 to 9 months. And we're doing it against a backdrop where now inflation is ticking back up and rates are ticking back up. So why is that important? It's important because now all of a sudden, what does this budget bill look like and what can we actually accomplish? There's the Senate version, which is super light, and it says, let's just deal with border security and military. And then there's what sort of Trump has asked for, which is the House version, which is this quote unquote one big beautiful bill. The problem is those two things are on a collision course, and the big bill may be a little bit too early in the sense that, to exactly your point, we don't know how bad the situation is. And if Bessent goes into the market and gets clubbed over the head, and now all of a sudden we have $10 trillion that we have to borrow at 5 or 5.5%,
Oh, God.
I think it's going to be really bad for the US economy, in which case there will be no choice except to make very deep cuts to in a broad-based way. So we almost need to buy some time and figure out how bad the situation is, which is why we need the air cover to sort of see how much DOGE uncovers, because that'll make the problem less at the end of the day, right? Because cutting that stuff will mean that's fewer fixed programs we have to cut. So that's kind of where we are. So I think we're in a delicate 60 to 90 day period, I think. There is some short-term wins already. So, he slapped a tariff, I think, on European car imports or whatnot, and they capitulated and they lowered their import tariff for American cars to match their own. So effectively, he said it was 5x greater, right? So if you tried to take a Ford F-150 into Europe, and now that import tariff is effectively the same as what we charge European cars on the way in. So to your point, there's already been some early wins. And then when you look at like Canada and Mexico, the threat of that 20 or 25% tariff essentially caused them to capitulate. So on the one hand, there's trade normalization. On the other hand, it's a negotiating gambit for other things that are more important in the moment, specifically border security and drugs and all of that stuff in the case of Mexico and Canada. But the reality is like that revenue source, if you offset it somehow, doesn't really do much to make the problem any better. Meaning, if you get a bunch of money in with tariffs, but then you also cut corporate taxes or you extend the tax cuts for individuals and make them permanent, the reality
Which
is
he's going to do.
all you're doing is sort of like, taking from Peter to pay Paul. It doesn't make the structural issue any better. And the structural issue is what Jason said, which is we have a huge debt wall that we are about to hit, and we have to find a permanent way out of it. And I think that's where the president is right, that there's going to be some short-term pain, because I don't see how all of these things actually get to the core structural issue, which is we're just spending too much. Congress is appropriating too much money to things that we can't account for. And the law says once Congress says go, you can't say no.
The stock market appears to be continuously overvalued, and it is possible that a correction is on the horizon. However, their valuations have now reached levels where even minor economic disruptions could trigger significant declines. The Magnificent Seven tech giants have experienced extraordinary growth, but their valuations have now reached these levels. Investors are starting to realize that their upward trajectory is not going to be endless, and as a consequence, other industries are beginning to gain traction. Meanwhile, the bond market is going through a significant rebalancing process as a result of the shifting economic policies that are being implemented. Chamath Palihapitiya draws attention to a number of important factors that are currently at play, including increasing tariffs, stricter immigration policies, and increases in government spending, all of which are reshaping market expectations. To further complicate matters, the United States of America is on the verge of refinancing a staggering $10 trillion worth of debt. Bond yields could fall as a consequence of this, which would be beneficial for Trump, but it would also bring about an increase in economic uncertainty about the future. Investors need to ensure that they are able to navigate these shifts with caution because the financial landscape is rapidly changing. Now, let's go back and look at some additional realizations from Chamath.
I think we all want to be and remain the most important country in the world. That should be, not really controversial. But the problem is that we have somehow found a way to debate how to get there. And I think how to get there has always been the same and will always be the same, which is America is the best when it has the most vibrant economy in the world and the most capable and powerful military in the world. That's it. And whenever any country has had those two things, if you look back in history, thousands of years, they've always been the most important and the most vibrant place, whether it's Rome or whether it's the, British Empire. But underneath that is one thing in this modern iteration, which is you must have technical supremacy. You must. If you make the best clothes, it doesn't mean much. You could have a vibrant fashion industry, but it's not going to give you economic vibrancy or military supremacy. If you have great, buildings, it doesn't do anything. You need technology supremacy. And this is why what Jason said is so critical. So why is Elon in there? I think part of what he's in there to do is to make sure that by helping to bat back some of these regulations, it's not just him, but there's so many others that hit this air pocket now that can actually do stuff on behalf of Team America. And if you're technically supreme, your economy will be the best. Your military will be the best. By the way, look at 2 days ago. There's a $24 billion program to arm the army with this incredible next generation vision system. Initially, it was given to Microsoft. Microsoft realized they couldn't do it. What did? They gave it to a startup, Anduril. Now what happens? That technical supremacy filters in through the economy, gets into our military. Our military will be that much better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And that cycle, for whatever reason, was frozen in time for literally 15 years. And this is what we need to undo. And in that 15 years, the biggest mistake we made was we allowed China to catch up. And now
Yeah.
they have a level of technical supremacy that rivals ours and in some cases exceeds us. And that was a mistake that we allowed to happen. I seeded this company about 8 or 9 years ago to make drones for the sea. It's called
Oh,
Saildrone.
Saildrone. Yeah, great company.
And, Saildrone now has contracts with the Coast Guard and the Navy and all of this stuff. But these are, as you can imagine, autonomous drones that you can deploy literally from the United States. And it can get to any conflict hotspot. And it has all of the sensor arrays it needs to collect information, send it back, etc. But to your point, Jason, the obvious thing 5 years ago would have been to add some kind of kinetic ability to those drones, right? Meaning those drones, by the way, one of our drones was famously intercepted by the Iranian Navy. Okay. I think in the Strait of Hormuz or someplace. But the reason we weren't able to add that, kinetic ability 5 years ago is because sort of internally, when you're building these things in, Berkeley, California,
Yep.
people have an opinion on that this is not cool or this is the patriotic thing is to actually not make these things happen. And somewhere along the way now, I think we've had a couple of examples, Andrew being the best, where no, the patriotic thing is to actually make sure Pax America wins.
Absolutely.
And it's incredible that it took all this time for us to be able to say that without sounding like some, right-wing loon. And,
Yeah. Yep.
and now we have to play catch up, which I think is the thing that frustrates me a little bit. It makes me concerned, quite honestly, but if we can get it done, then I think we'll be in a much better place. No, and I think he said the quiet part out loud, and you weren't allowed to say it because it was, almost like it was like a virtue signaling test. You have to maintain this line, even though everybody behind the scenes already knew, to your point, the answer. I mean, the crazy thing about Russia, Ukraine is a couple things. One is, it pulled us in to a situation where the Europeans really should have been taking the lead. And instead, we had to have the opinion. Then we became the major funder. It turns out we sent, $200+ billion, of which at least 100 billion has gotten completely misplaced, which is unbelievable. And it just goes to show you that you can't even have a conversation about what's right or wrong. And so now, do we need to audit what happened over there? Probably. Do we need a resolution? Yeah, instantly. And I would rather us be able to take our mental energy and focus it internally. And I think that we weren't allowed to say that. To your point, when I said that, it was really more in the context of China and, some of the things that are going on in China, but it also applied to Ukraine and applied to many things. And, people tried to cancel me. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. And now it looks like, most Americans, I think, to your point, believe that the right thing to do is just to focus internally and get our house in order.
Point.
The long
Give us our
tail-
money back.
The long tail of that conflict, though, guys, is going to play out over many decades in Europe. I think that, the question is, well, can Europe change the playbook? Meaning, in the middle of that conflict to basically just torpedo their ability to actually import energy, to then still continue down the path of turning off domestic nuclear. France was the only one that basically said, this is crazy, I'm not going to do it. And then have to import all this energy from all over the world at all these exorbitant prices. At the same time, the economy is sort of very fragile. Like the European continent is in a lot of trouble. And these last 3 or 4 years have actually added a lot of fuel to the fire. So I think smart people need to have a better opportunity to just be smart in public and then have the public be able to absorb that and actually make decisions. That's why these things are nuts. Like what's happened is crazy.
There is a seismic shift on the horizon, one that has the potential to send shockwaves through the real estate sector as well as the stock market. The convergence of structural imbalances, increasing economic pressures, and shifting political dynamics is laying the groundwork for a significant transformation to take place. According to KTH, a powerful new political movement is currently taking shape, and it is one that has the potential to fundamentally alter the economic landscape. It is possible that the impact on asset prices will be significant as policies continue to develop and priorities shift. There is a possibility that the old playbook will no longer be applicable in this rapidly changing environment, So both homeowners and investors need to get themselves ready for the possibility of volatility. I appreciate you watching.